Welcome to the Developers Who Test podcast, a podcast for developers who embrace test automation so they can ship better quality software faster and have more fun doing it. Today's episode of the Developers Who Test podcast is brought to you by Testery.com. Whether you're a developer who has just a handful of tests or even thousands, then your tests deserve to be running on the fastest and most reliable platform for open source testing. With AI-driven insights and analytics, unparalleled parallelism, and awesome integrations, Testery enables you to get more from your tests. Check us out today at Testery.com. We're speaking today with Ashish Ghosh. Ashish is Quality Assurance Architect at ING, where he leads their Quality Center of Excellence, and he travels the world encouraging their teams to adopt better software testing practices and tools. He's also an international conference keynote speaker, gave a wonderful keynote speech at TestCon Europe this year, which I was fortunate enough to attend. And if you ever get a chance, I highly recommend going to one of his sessions. Welcome to the Developers Who Test podcast, Ashish.
Hey, thanks, Chris. Thanks for having me. Really excited.
Yeah, thank you. So I always love hearing about what people are currently up to and how they got there. So could you share a little bit about what it means to be leading the testing quality center of excellence for ING?
Yeah, sure. I would really love to do that. Especially the kind of history that it has, and now looking behind, it seems like a long journey for me. So I started off in ING as a test. I would say not even a test engineer, but a test analyst who would just try to understand how the business works and then try to uh, do my bit contributing towards what we felt was good testing back then. A lot of the stuff that we did was manual and archaic. Um, we have seen situations where testing was literally a second class, maybe even a third class citizen in an organization as big as ING. But gradually, over a period of 5, 6 years, the whole transformation journey happened in ING, where we were able to push the importance of testing and quality assurance towards the leadership. And now we are at a stage where people really think that this needs the kind of attention that we are giving it now. For a long period of time, we had been ignoring it. I won't say ignoring, but it was very much implicit, but now it has become very, very explicit. I'm happy to be part of a journey where I have seen this entire transformation, and that kind of gave me the kind of experience that I think now will allow me to lead it to success. Still, keeping my fingers crossed, it's going to be a long journey ahead. So yeah,
Mhm.
that's the story.
Yeah, what do you think was the catalyst or real inflection point that got all of that started? Like why did the organization decide, okay, quality is something we want to focus on more now?
Yeah, so there are two or three different factors, to be honest. The first important thing was um, so I'm going to talk about from a domain perspective, the domain that I have been part of, and then I'm going to move on to the global scenario. So from the domain that I come from, it's the wholesale banking, right? So you have the retail banking and the wholesale banking. The wholesale banking caters to the big clients, the clients with big numbers. Uh, so what we were doing is we were going about doing our normal business, normal testing, until a point in time where a project, a big account management system, which was sitting right in the middle of the entire core banking system, it was supposed to undergo an upgrade. And that upgrade was a humongous upgrade, multiple versions of upgrade. And the timelines of that project were very stringent. With the help of very clever testing strategies and nice testing automation that we had implemented, we were able to finish the testing part, which was originally planned to be the longest part in the upgrade. We were able to finish it much earlier. So for the very first time,
Hmm.
in this domain, the bank was witnessing a project which has gone live ahead of its scheduled time, and yet the number of high priority defects were zero. And that kind of
Mm.
just shook up the whole bank. It was like, hey, the concept of faster time to market is not a myth, it is a reality. And to
Mhm.
add to that, that high quality, that was like the icing on the cake. And from that point onwards, it was more of a ripple effect. And it started
Mm.
spreading to the whole of the domain, and then eventually to other domains. And now the global organization is looking at it. But that's one factor. The other factor
Mhm.
that I would really like to call out, Chris, is over the last few years, we have seen a massive change in mindset of our leadership team, and I'm really blessed to be part of a leadership program where people really take a lot of importance in high quality delivery, and it's top down,
Mm.
right, from the CTO all the way to the different CIOs, followed by the tribe leads. Yeah, so I think these are the two main factors.
Yeah, I think that second factor is a really good one to call out. I go into a lot of organizations. We obviously help with quality consulting and things like that, and you know, it- you can see the bottom up grassroots efforts of let's get test automation in place, let's pick the framework, let's get it part of CI/CD, and that side of it is incredibly important as well. But nothing tanks a quality effort like going into an all hands meeting where the CEO of the company says, "Well, this time let's just ship it anyway. Like I'm going to a conference next week. It's got to be out there. I know you found a bunch of issues. I know you invested in test automation, but let's just ship it anyway." And there is a certain place for pragmatism, but when the leadership of a company says something like that, they need to be extremely careful about what words they use, or it can just totally deflate any future efforts to do anything with quality.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the key
Yeah.
messages that our leadership has spread is quality first. So
Yeah.
it just sends out such a strong message to everybody. So it's not a message about automation. It's a message about quality first. Of course, automation comes implicitly, and that the engineering culture comes with it. But when you hear your leadership from the CTO to the CIO's level talking about quality first, I think it's a very bright sign for ING Bank, I can say.
Mhm. Yeah. So I'd love to talk a little bit about the actual impacts of a poor quality experience. And part of why this is so near and dear to my heart is we're all users of technology, and when you become a quality professional, it's your job to pay attention to what works and what doesn't. You're reporting issues when things don't work, so you're kind of finely tuned to, okay, what's not working, and keep the list and all of that. And I keep finding in my day-to-day life, we're using so many different services from so many different companies now, and it's hard to get through a single day without encountering one or two defects, or if not defects, at least extremely poor quality customer service and
Yeah.
things like that. And so, just for an example, today, it's afternoon there where you are in the Netherlands. Here it's 7 a.m. in the U.S., and I've already encountered a few issues. Right before going into this, my computer decided to install a firmware update and reboot. Then, the right microphone's not selected anymore, so I've got to go through and pick the right microphone. The other day, I'm in my car, and the audio normally mutes whenever the directions come on for where you're going, because it's Android Auto. But then this other app popped up, and because the other app popped up and grabbed the speaker, now all of a sudden the radio is playing at the same time as the navigation. It feels like a lot of these little things build up. Have you experienced the same thing, or
Oh
is it
yeah.
just me?
Oh, yeah. In fact, just before joining this meeting, this podcast with you, I had the exact same experience. I couldn't get the camera working, even though it just simply said click to turn on the camera. It just did not turn on the camera. I had to reboot, I had to shut down the whole system, and voila, it works. Yeah, I mean, that's one side. Then a couple of evenings ago, I was trying to submit a call for papers for one of the conferences. It seemingly was a very nice, well-designed website where I could just simply, yeah, just log in, enter the details, hit submit. Yeah, the submit just doesn't go through. I was looking for all the error messages. Where did I go wrong? Nothing. Then I had to redo the
And this
whole.
is for a quality conference.
This is for a quality
Yeah.
conference. I had to redo the whole process, step 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, eventually landing and just keeping fingers crossed. I hit submit and then, yeah, next time it worked. So, yeah, quite crazy.
Yeah. I've also, when we encounter these, that you get these cute messages that say, hey, we're really sorry. And they've obviously put a lot of time and effort into what should our apology be. But wouldn't it be nice if they put that same amount of time and effort into actually making sure there weren't issues to begin with, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. Especially when it costs you money, it really starts to hurt. For example, last month I was trying to book a flight. It was an intercontinental flight and it was quite expensive flight. And I had to add my baby daughter as one of the persons in the list of family members. I by
Mhm.
mistake added the wrong date as her date of birth, and obviously I cannot proceed with it because then eventually when the ticket would be issued and then when we try to board the flight, there will be some checks, and that's not okay. So what I did was I tried to delete it, and it wouldn't get deleted. Somehow I had to call the people and then they would just delete it, which is fine from the back end. But then when I tried to add her again, it would just not accept the same name. Even though I had
Hmm.
the right date of birth, the same name was just not getting accepted. And then I had to go through this back and forth uh, with these call center people, and I was already losing 7 or 8 days in the process. And the prices, the ticket prices were soaring. So when it really hits you in terms of money, you start to feel the pinch. That's just a very simple thing, right? Why wouldn't it go through? And eventually, of course, the tester in me had to find a hack. I added her name with a space next to it and then hit submit, and it went through. So, yeah, quite
Yeah.
crazy.
Yeah. I was talking about quality issues with folks at Thanksgiving. We just recently had Thanksgiving here, and uh, sometimes they do a friendsgiving where instead of family, you're just with friends and you have a nice dinner together. And one couple that was there was telling us that uh, they went on a cruise, and the travel agent showed them the rules for how old a child has to be, and it said, the child can be 6 months or 180 days old. And they were like cutting it really close. They had this certain window. And so they were told 180 days. Oh, it's got to be 180 days. And so their child, when they go to show up, is, I think it was 182 days old.
Okay.
But not every month has the same number of days,
Yeah.
right? Uh, And so they go to board the cruise ship. They were able to purchase the ticket on the website because the website used the 180-day rule. When they went to board the cruise ship, they were denied boarding because they were using the 6-month rule. And so it's easy for us to think like, oh, those things are equivalent, but then when you go to actually experience them, or the way they get implemented by developers, those slight differences can have, real impacts on people. So if you've ever done a cruise, you don't typically leave from your hometown. You typically fly there. So they, blocked out their vacation time. They flew to the city only to get to the port and initially be denied boarding. Now, their story was a good story because the captain eventually let them on. But we have all of these issues that sometimes just start out as, small miscommunications of the requirements, even, and then they get implemented and have very real impacts. But I want to turn away from, some of the more trivial impacts to some of these more serious impacts. I mean, if you look in the past year or even going back a few years, it feels like some of the impacts of poor quality are having even more larger impacts on people's day-to-day lives, but also in very real financial and even uh, people's lives. So I was curious, what your thoughts are on that, if you have any examples of how poor quality has really affected people in a very serious way.
Yeah, quite a few, in fact. Um, as recently as 10 days ago, there was a news that came out that in India, in one of the states, it's called UP, Uttar Pradesh, uh, there was a group of friends driving in a car, and Google Maps was telling them, "Hey, this is a flyover that you need to take." They took the
Mm.
flyover. It was a foggy morning, and they fell right off the flyover because it was still under construction.
Well,
And Google Maps was actually telling them, this is a flyover that you need to take. How would you describe this experience? It's nightmarish. It's a horror. Like you're basically risking your life because you are at the mercy of a tech that you believe, but it doesn't have the right quality that it deserves. That's one. Then you
mm,
look at the crashes that happened, right? For the Boeing flights. What was it? Uh, the 730 Max, right? They had these
mhm,
MCAS system, which was meant to make sure that your flight would be stabilized because they had made their engines heavier, and then the MCAS just relied on a single sensor coming from the tail of the plane. And then we had two flights in a matter of 5 months, two flights where the MCAS overruled the pilot and they had a nosedive. They took the yoke straight down because they had an erroneous signal
mm.
from the sensor. And 180 passengers in the first one and close to 160 passengers in the second one. They all lost their lives, all because of, yeah, poor quality.
Mm. Yeah. It's interesting that you highlighted the point that it overrode the human in the situation.
Yeah,
And I think that's a really interesting aspect of it, that, you know, the human knew something was wrong
yeah,
and didn't have the ability to set things right because we trusted the system to get it right.
yeah. In both
I think
these
that's a really
cases,
interesting property of that situation. Yeah.
yeah, in both these cases, if you look at it, uh, 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 if we were blindly trusting the tech, in the first case, we're blindly trusting that, yeah, Google Maps can't go wrong. I mean, why would Google Maps take you to a flyover which was under construction? And in the second case,
Mm,
the pilots, when they had the yoke down, they just couldn't lift it because it was fully, uh, it was not overrideable. Let's say, yeah, that is how they had designed it, and
mm.
that's something that's concerning. That you're giving so much power to the tech, and lives are at stake.
Yeah. So what's a little bit haunting about your Google Maps example is I remember, I want to say it was mid 2000s, so maybe about 20 years ago, and Google Maps was a fairly new technology. I don't even remember if it was Google Maps or at the time there were some competing map providers. Uh, but the one of the editors from CNET followed the directions on Google Maps or whatever mapping software they were using, and took his family on a closed mountain road where, to get to his destination in the wintertime, you would have to drive, 400 miles, several hours to get around the mountains. But when the weather's good, there was a mountain pass that's maybe only 5 miles. It was some situation like that.
Mm.
And so the mapping software said, take the mountain pass. And anybody who was a local would know, like, okay, you should only do that if you have four-wheel drive, chains on your tires. Even then, if it snowed lately, I wouldn't do it. But the tech told him, go ahead and take that. And it was, again, a pretty terrible situation. I mean, I think they found the vehicle, they'd removed the tires so that they could burn the rubber, and he went off hiking to try to find a cabin that was supposed to be on the map and everything. But again, it was a situation where we trusted the technology. And I guess, to me, what's haunting about it is that was about 20 years ago.
Mm.
Your example was what, 10
10
days
days
ago?
ago. Yeah.
Yeah, and so it's a very similar type of issue, and yet we're still facing it 2 decades later.
Yeah.
So that kind of begs the question, like, what should companies be doing differently to start protecting quality again? Like, do companies even care about quality anymore?
Yeah. I think one of the first things that we as engineers, we probably have to realize that we are so outward focused. We have what we call an outward shift. An outward shift is a shift in mindset towards tech, towards tools, towards frameworks. I go to any project within the bank and I talk about, hey, let's talk about testing. And the first thing they say, yeah, we are using Cucumber, we are using Playwright. And I'm like,
Hmm.
I'm here to talk about testing. Where this discussion should have started is with an inner shift, meaning your analytical skills, your core skills, your skills that make you question the quality of the application, how it is being built. Is it adding value? Is it okay to have this feature in the business? What if this goes wrong? How does it impact the customers? This shift that we have witnessed over the last few, I would say, years, maybe over the last 2 decades, a shift from critical thinking, analytical thinking towards being completely tool focused has been really detrimental in testing.
Hmm.
Uh, and this has also taken a toll in the way how leaders, or well, I won't say leaders, but how management, higher management in various companies look at it. For them, it's all about automation. However, it should have been the other way around. Automation is just to help you do proper testing, which is a product of critical thinking. So we somehow have
Hmm.
to push critical thinking, have to push analytical thinking to that level that it comes back to the center. And automation can take its own space in that ecosystem, but it cannot be the primary thing. This is what I feel. And I think
Yeah.
we are seeing that shift in ING Bank.
Yeah, I think that's incredibly insightful. And, it reminds us of the shift from manual testing to automated testing to begin with. Uh, there's obviously a lot of value that manual testers provide. And, I think if the focus had been on the analytical thinking and the critical thinking skills, and how well do people know the requirements, how well do people know the customers, how well can they put themselves in the mindset of the customer and represent the customer in a room with that quality mindset. uh I mean, it's an excellent point. That part of the conversation has nothing to do with how you're going to actually implement those tests. Are you going
Exactly.
to implement them in Cucumber? Well, if they make sense in Cucumber, then fine.
Yeah.
Are you going to do the manual? If they make sense in the manual, then fine. But if you don't start with that input, you're not going to get a good set of tests. And somewhere along the way, you're right. The managers, probably through a lack of understanding of what the role was really about, started thinking of manual testers just as button clickers
Yeah.
and automation as just a technology to replace button clickers.
Yeah.
And we lost that idea of how do you really understand the customer? How do you represent the customer in a conversation? How do you think critically about the system? So,
Yeah,
yeah, I think
absolutely.
that's really insightful. In companies that don't have that, and really in an industry as a whole that seems to be losing that,
Mm.
how can we encourage others to start embracing that mindset again?
Yeah, I think we need to talk about quality. I think we have to break this barrier that invisible barrier that is there between manual testing and automated testing. We have to break this barrier. We have to bring in an overarching uh, topic about testing and quality first. Somehow, what I have at least managed to do within ING is to talk about quality first, impact, and then all the discussions about automation. Uh, and mind you, I'm fully in support of automation. I live and breathe code, right? That's the kind of automation that I love for automation that I have. But I genuinely believe that without a good critical mindset, my automation skills are of no value. I can automate the hell out of my application, but yet touch zero impactful test cases. What value add am I doing, right? So somehow I've been able to make sure that this message comes down from the top, from the leadership towards every squad, every engineer. And if you can build what I genuinely think is a good thing to have, a community of practice, this thing spreads, right? A community of practice is a collection, is a group of people who believe in a certain thought process, who shares the same goals and ideas, but they, unlike a guild, a, a COP, they have a vision, they have a mission. And in ING, we are trying to form this community of practice who spreads this awareness, talks to people. And if you can do this, if you can build a strong community of practice, not just internally in an organization, but also make them part of the global ecosystem, I think it will spread like wildfire.
Hmm.
Everybody, I keep talking to these engineers and I say, how many times have you heard your manager or your tribe lead or your IT lead come and pat your back saying, wow, what a wonderful piece of code that you have written? Zero. But he or she would definitely come and tell you, wow, you've managed to catch a very important defect that didn't get leaked. So that is how you need to look at it, the value that you're adding. So that's what I think,
Yeah.
Chris.
Yeah, I remember one project we did, and the tester and the developer really worked hard on doing test-driven development, not implementing the code until there were tests. And it was integrating with a third-party system, and sometimes those are the more challenging ones because you don't always have control over all those scenarios. And we went live with the project, and like 3 or 4 weeks later, had that realization of, oh, there weren't any issues. And as a manager, I almost forgot to even mention anything about it because it's so easy to just move on to the next thing and go on with life as usual, right?
Yeah.
We notice all of the fires that get reported in the ticketing system, but how often does someone report in the ticketing system like, "Hey, nothing happened today," and then
Yeah.
that gets celebrated, right? So
Yeah.
we definitely focus on the what goes wrong uh, more than the what goes right. But yeah, so do you think this community of practice idea, like how can we take that and go beyond the walls of our own organizations, and how can we get a not just community of testers and quality professionals to appreciate this, but how can we get the broader business community to start focusing on quality again?
Yeah. If you look at an organization structure, and if you look at what happens in an organization, maybe the answer to your question would be just to extrapolate it. But let's look at what happens in an org. It's not just a tester's responsibility or a quality professional's responsibility to implement quality in the whole cycle, right? If you look at the whole cycle, you have these requirements that come in from the business users, a very poor quality requirement where you have not specified your acceptance criteria or you have not specified exactly what needs or what is expected, eventually leads to poor code development and poor testing. So there is an ownership that the person who gives the requirement has. Then you look at the next stage where you start building your code, your application. The developers need to be able to do a proper unit test, contract test, whatever, to test their bit, their components, their code, then push it to the next stage. Here, what in ING we call them a customer journey expert or a business analyst, together with test engineers, they are able to test it as if it's now a black box because it has been deployed to an environment, and they test it from the perspective of how a user would eventually experience it. So you see, it's not a single phase. There are multiple phases to it. Everybody has to be accountable for each stage. Everybody has to feel responsible for each stage. So quality is a shared responsibility. I have been in enormous discussions with, different managers, area leads, where when I when I say testing and quality, they only look at that third stage that I just explained. And it took me a lot of effort to explain to them that before coming to this stage, you need to ensure quality in the requirement gathering. You need to ensure quality in the build phase. Then you need to ensure quality in the next phase. So now if you take this whole concept out to the open source or in the open world, spreading awareness, doing lots of podcasts like the way we are doing now, doing a lot of conferences which focus on quality or the importance of quality and not just on automation. Of course, automation is part of it, but not just focused on automation. Creating forums. I think these are the best ways to spread the awareness. Lots of individuals, lots of stalwarts in the quality assurance field who are doing this already. I find their posts on LinkedIn incredibly helpful. But yeah, I think these are the few steps that I think we should take.
Yeah, I really like your suggestion earlier in this episode about taking the tools out of it and focusing on the analytical skills, the critical thinking, understanding the customer. I wonder if that's part of why the roles aren't well understood by, let's say, non-technical business folks. Is, we start throwing out jargon and terms like test-driven development, or that was one of the challenges with Cucumber and behavior-driven development. Is you're going to a business person and you're saying, I want you to learn the gherkin syntax.
Yeah.
Right. And they're like, immediately the business person is like, the reason I didn't go get a computer science degree is I don't want to learn syntax. And, at the end of the day, gherkin syntax is really just, hey, when this happens, then what do you expect to happen?
Yeah.
When that happens, what do you expect to happen? Right.
Yeah.
So we added this jargony term on top of what's a common sense practice of, when the customer does this, what do you expect?
Yeah.
And I think just saying that it's a syntax or expecting people to write things in text files and check them into code repositories, it created enough friction on the business side that what should have been something that made sense to begin with now feels like, oh, you're asking me to be a developer. I'm not a developer. I don't want to learn how to be a developer. If I did, I would do it, right? So I love your idea of like, let's go back to focusing on the analytical skills piece and representing the customer in those conversations.
Yeah, very nicely said, Chris.
Do you?
I really like the way you presented this whole dilemma, not just dilemma, but the struggle that the business users would eventually have. I really like that piece because I have spoken with so many customer journey experts within ING who have expressed a lot of disinterest in writing these not cucumber, but Kirkin files. However, they are very, very willing to contribute towards good quality tests through their knowledge, through how they understand the requirements. But forcing them to write feature files, it's it's madness, to be honest.
Yeah. I always felt like that was one of the challenges with Cucumber was that the tests themselves were hidden in text files in a code repository, and we had this expectation that people would write them who don't normally live in the code repository. And a lot of the Cucumber projects, I think, also struggled from this misunderstanding that if we just write the feature files, the coding part goes away and will be automatic, and we won't need developers to write tests anymore.
Yeah.
So that was one of the challenges that I think Cucumber really struggled with in a lot of organizations.
Fully agree.
Yeah. Yeah. So I love this idea of let's get businesses to start caring about quality again. Let's help them understand things. Maybe we take some of the jargon out of it to do that. Maybe we take some of the tools out of it to do that. What's in it for them? Like, why should a company invest more in quality?
Very simply put, there are two angles to this. One is the monetary angle. The higher is the quality of your product, the more number of customers you're attracting, the more business that you have. It's a very simple equation. You have a mobile app, you're a banking company or an insurance company, you have a mobile app with a rating of 4.9 out of 5. More often than not, people would start using your app, would start investing time and effort in being your customer than anybody else's. So that's one. The second one is a question of empathy. You are serving your customers. You're doing something for them. It's a matter of a service, let's say, and somehow you've got them locked into some sort of a customer relationship, and yet you're not giving them the experience that they deserve, the experience that they should have. And then it's a question to conscience, right? So these are two basic angles that I can think of. One, monetary, plain and simple, and the other is a question of empathy.
Yeah. Have you heard about the recent issues that the Sonos speaker company has been facing?
No.
Yeah. So this is a company that they make wireless speakers. So if you want whole home audio and you don't want to tear down all your walls and put in wires, you can install wireless speakers. Earlier this year, they rolled out a new upgrade, and I think as a result of the upgrade, they lost almost half of their value in their stock. And this is just an example of, here's what one of the customers had to say about it on their forum. Said, I'm absolutely appalled and frustrated with Sonos for rolling out an upgrade that's effectively rendered the app and our highly expensive speaker systems unusable. This is completely unacceptable from a company of Sonos's nature. The CEO should seriously consider resigning over this debacle.
Oh boy.
that was posted to their community, and their sales are hurting, their stocks hurting, and they apparently tried to roll back the upgrade, but they couldn't do it because it was the kind of upgrade that has to go forward, and people lost basic functionality. So here you've spent maybe $3,000 or $5,000 on a speaker system, and now it doesn't even work because of this upgrade, or you're missing core functionality. So clearly a quality and testing issue up front, but also encapsulated in that is the how do we respond to issues when they happen?
Mm.
How do we make it so that when issues happen, they're only affecting a small slice of people and we can quickly recover? There are all of these things that we talk about in terms of quality that could have been done there, but the end result is people actually lost their jobs over it, and even people who weren't responsible directly for the issue but lost their jobs because the company's valuation isn't as good as it was. Sales are down, and those types of things. But it also affected their users. Somebody saved up their money to buy that speaker system, and now they can't use it, right?
Yeah.
Um, so we've talked about a few ways that within your organizations, you can look at quality a little better. Hopefully, this is encouraging folks to think of the quality roles not just in terms of, hey, you're someone who's automating tests. Hey, you're someone who's manually clicking on buttons. Hey, you're just an exploratory tester. But let's start thinking of ourselves as actual, representatives of the customer and bringing that customer mindset into all of those conversations. Thinking critically, using analytical skills to think about what can possibly break and what should we do to respond to it. But also, as we go into 2025, what can we do not just within our own organizations, but what can we do together as a community to bring these practices to a broader business community? So, thank you so much. We've been speaking with Ashish Ghosh, who's a test automation architect at ING Bank. As I mentioned at the start of the episode, he's an international podcast speaker. He's done keynote speak. I keep screwing that up. Keynote speeches. So highly recommend checking him out the next time he's in your area, and follow this guy on LinkedIn and see what he's up to and what posts he follows and makes himself. So thank you so much for being on Developers Who Test, Ashish.
Thank you so much, Chris. It was lovely talking to you, and it was so refreshing to share these ideas and also get the same kind of resonance from you.